Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the From Busy to Rich podcast. We help financial advisors grow their businesses beyond the products they sell and the assets they manage to increase profitability and reclaim their time by providing strategies and insights that will not only change your life, but practice. Wes, it's great to see you today. How are you doing?
Fantastic, Justin. Good to see you.
It's nice coming in on a Friday, easy day, come in and prep some of this and talk about some exciting things. I know this has been, or today's topic particularly, has been center stage for us in a lot of client conversations and really how we're integrating things into our practice and some of the evolutions. And so I won't tease too much and foreshadow. I'll let us jump into it. But really the point is to set the stage is a lot of us in this industry are so familiar, and even out of this industry, with discussions around inheritance, the stuff that we can leave behind and what that looks like and planning around it. We've really been having great conversations and shifting focus on the difference of heritage versus an inheritance. And we start looking at what are the intangibles and how does that affect from a planning standpoint. And so I'll kick it off to you so we can dive into where are we going with this. And this may turn into a series, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, well, there's this idea, and as we've been working, of course, with clients around this recently, and really digging deeper than we have in the past. And I love the distinctions between an inheritance. We're talking about we really want to enrich the family heritage, and inheritance is certainly part of that because inheritance is, as you said, Justin, it's about the stuff, right? It's about passing things from one person to another. Your cash, your investments, the real estate that you have. I mean, all those tangible things, and you should do that. You should spend time, putting in place good will and trust structures that set up whoever is inheriting those things for the best opportunities possible. And so that involves making sure, as an example, I pass away and things go in trust for the benefit of Jamie, where she's the trustee, she's the beneficiary, but she's not necessarily, while she has all the qualities or I guess the advantages of having the assets and all access to them, she doesn't have the negatives of outright ownership. So in other words, in the right trust, she gets married and divorced. That guy can't take half of what I meant for her to have. Or if she gets sued by a litigation attorney and there's a judgment, by state statute, those assets are protected. Follow that up with that those assets go to the kids, right? Both of us pass. And rather than those going outright to them at whatever age they happen to be, my kids are 21 and 19 as we record this. It's like we certainly want to protect them from divorces and we certainly want to protect them from creditors, but also just youth and inexperience. I mean, I don't know what you were like at age 21 or 19, Justin, but if you'd have buried me with like a bunch of money, we'd have had a great time. I wouldn't have that money and we may be in jail. I don't know. It would be quite interesting. So
I'd like to think that I was super responsible and everything else, but the reality is I was 21.
Yeah, that's right.
just the truth of it.
And even if you have somebody that's super like responsible, just having that much wealth all of a sudden is not a blessing, and in fact, it can be a big curse because just people have good ideas and they think you should do them and they seem good to you because you haven't had reps with evaluating them or negative experiences of investing in them, like paying the tuition that should not have ever had to been paid. So there's the one side that I think is real important, which is, yes, we need inheritance planning. But coupled with that, and as or even more important, is heritage planning. Because heritage planning is about passing your wisdom, values, insights, traditions to the people that are inheriting what you have. You can have people that, and there's great examples that I'll talk about, that get people that get a big inheritance, but they don't really have the same heritage that created that inheritance. And as a result, they're out of that inheritance in a very short period of time. You look at the Vanderbilt family, and Cornelius Vanderbilt was one of the richest men in his day, and he left a ton of wealth as an inheritance. But what they didn't do is really do much structuring around heritage planning, leaving the vision, values, missions, behaviors that helped him create that. And as a result, 100 years after he died, when they had the Vanderbilt family reunion, I think there was 120 families there, and there wasn't a millionaire left in the bunch. And now people have done good things out of that family and certainly created a wealth. but it wasn't because they inherited it. It is because they built a heritage that was capable of building it again. And that's the old shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. The first generation builds it, the second generation spends it, and then the third generation is rolling up their shirt sleeves and doing it again, trying to build it again. And you contrast that with like the Rockefeller family, and the great book on this is What Would the Rockefellers Do? Garrett Gunderson, he's been on the show before, and it just really tells the story of how the Vanderbilts versus the Rockefellers. Rockefellers, yes, he left a ton of wealth, J.D. Rockefeller, but he also was very intentional about leaving a heritage with that inheritance. And as a result, their wealth has not just stayed the same and not gone down, it has expanded. And they've done a lot of good there. So this idea of heritage in and of itself, one of the things that we talk to our clients about is really just starting at a very short little simple entry point, and that's doing a family constitution, a simple one-page family constitution that kind of outlines, hey, what is, if I was to go back and tell the 10-year younger version of myself, these are the things that you need to hold on to. These are the things that ultimately give you the capacity to have a heritage that builds the inheritance, or not cause it to go the other way, which is reduce it or have it go away. What would they be? Like, what do we stand for? What is our family about up to this point? And so what was interesting, and where I think we'll spend the meat of our time today, is as I was rewriting mine and I was kind of spending time thinking about this, it really began to expand. In fact, it expanded so much that it became a couple of books, which will be out later this year, called Beautiful Savage and Beautiful Savage Heritage. And common denominator in both is really this idea of fear. And fear, when I think about it, I'll talk about how this fits in. You can experience the emotion of fear, but what you do with that emotion next really matters. In fact, you should experience the emotion of fear, because that means you're looking into counting the costs. You're actually taking inventory of what could happen that may not be ideal. What is it that is causing you to experience that emotion? But what happens next is critically important, because you can experience the emotion of fear and not take on the identity of being afraid. In fact, most people, if they look back on some of their greatest regrets, it was a result of taking on the identity of that emotion they felt. They became afraid. It was who they are. And they began to operate out of that system, which is a system of not of abundance, but of scarcity. It's a system of lack, and instead of expansion. And it causes you to not take some of the chances, or take advantage of some of the opportunities that will lead you to your next big jump. And so, in fact, I love it. Jesus talked about this constantly with his disciples over and over again. You look and he would say, hey, guys, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And if you look, he was telling them that in moments where they were definitely experiencing the emotion of fear, because he was putting them in environments where they should have been afraid. And so he was saying, guys, don't take on the identity of fear. Yeah, dance with it, understand it, don't act like it's not there. But at the same time, I need you to do something critical with that emotion, and that is not be afraid. And so there's these two acronyms for the word fear. So you can face everything and run, or you can face everything and rise. And so I want to talk about these two. Face everything and run is where you do take on the identity of being afraid. It's where you say, you know what, this is too scary. Too many things could go wrong. What if it doesn't work out? And if I look back on my life, and I look back on every major point of growth, major point of success, things that we celebrate today, it never involved us facing the things that could go wrong and running. It was the latter. It was facing everything and rising, saying, in spite of that thing I'm afraid of, in spite of what could go wrong, we think we have a good path forward to at least try the next step and move in that. So thoughts on any of that, Justin, before we expand?
Well, I do want to add the point or the caveat that sometimes the situation requires you to actually run, but you're still rising up to the occasion. Like if there's a lion on the loose in your area, running away is probably a good path forward, right? It's a healthy sense of fear. But like me, coming from special forces, I've been shot at, blown up, number of different components, and put in difficult situations, just like many other people have. there's not a single person that's ever been in one of those situations that didn't feel fear.
Right.
It was very much a part of it, but fear became a huge motivator to not to not want to have the negative outcome that we were aware of that was possible. So we chose to embrace the situation and take advantage of what opportunities were available. To identify the best path forward for us was to choose the path that provided the greatest chances or probability of survival in light of what we had access to. But the same thing applies to starting a new business, having a
Yeah.
baby. That there's so much to that, and somehow capturing that, creating, I mean, this whole topic of finding ways to accelerate that learning process and capability for the next generation, like, is just such a powerful component. Even this point of discussion, like, how do you work through that? How do you dance with the resistance, and how do you teach the next generation so that when they're encountering it and growing up, that they're not having to take the long way around like you did?
Yeah. And I think that it's important, something you brought up there, because when it comes to this, it's not, what this isn't, what we're not saying here is that you don't acknowledge the things that you should be experiencing the emotion of fear from. Like, you don't have an ungrounded optimism is that, right? It's the person who says, "Oh, we'll just do it. It's going to work out great." Well, they're not looking at the things that could go the other way. And again, I'm an optimist, but I'm a very grounded optimist. I understand and I will dance with what could go wrong, and that'll help me understand and kind of categorize and quantify, okay, what's the real risk here? Like, if the worst possible thing happens, then what do we do? And then, but I think you have grounded pessimists too that are like, it's just too many things could go wrong. We're not even going to try it. When we start, and most advisors listening to this, like, you've already faced everything and rose when you started your practice. Because I mean, if you take my entry door, I was 24 years old and I was in the electrical contracting business. And when I started understanding, hey, I think there's a different kind of way you could approach holistic planning, there was so many things that I looked at that didn't make any sense. Like, you're an electrician, right? That's your background. And that time I was more running part of the organization and getting jobs and also managing accounts. So there was some carryover, right? There were some things that weren't like so foreign, but at the same time, it was an industry switch. And and I could look at that and go, "Hey, you're 24, nobody's gonna listen to you. You also don't have a bunch of reps in the financial services business, and, man, all things go wrong. What if you start and you don't make enough income to continue to do this and you have to quit? And what if nobody wants to call you back, right? What if you can't figure this out? What if you can't get the knowledge you need?" And those are real things, and you should do that. Fear it's not that fear isn't a part of your journey. It's just not your identity. It's like when one of my friends says, fear is kind of like that crazy uncle that you have. You still let him come on the trip. You just don't let him drive the car. That's really the main thing. And so when it comes to that, what oftentimes doesn't happen is also the counter to say, yeah, but what if things did work? What if they work half as good as I think? What if they work, and what if I just have to get better and then they're eventually gonna come out? And, today, some almost, what is it, 24, 25 years later, we've got, 20 team members across the country. We have clients all across the country. Not that it was a 45-degree angle up to that. I mean, it was a bumpy ride, and there was lots of times where I'm going, "Oh, man, I don't know how this is gonna work out." But otherwise, I would have never known. And I think that's the other thing is here's what you should have fear of. Here's where fear you should deeply experience it and rise is the fear of what if you don't do it? Like, what are what if you didn't do it? What if I didn't take that leap all these years ago? We wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation today. And every single time we add new team members, single time we buy a practice, every single time we do that, there are real fears and they need to be acknowledged. They just don't need to be taken on as your identity. You need to say, okay, then how can we give ourselves the best possible opportunity to inherit the future we think we have? And that's just dancing with that fear. Fear is a big part of resistance between the life you're living and the unlived life within you.
Yeah, there's actually multiple studies that I've read about where a researcher or somebody has gone and questioned people who are in later stages of life, asking about, for those types of insights, what are the things you learn? What do you wish you would have done differently? And without fail, one of the top components, typically within one of the top five things that seems to resonate universally, is they almost always mention at some point in the conversation that they wish they would have taken more chances, or they wish
Yeah.
they would have risked more. They wish they hadn't played it so safely, be-
Yeah.
because it's all the things that they didn't try is where a lot of the regret came from. Not the things that they did, not the things that they. Don't get me wrong. There's some things that I tried that I could have avoided, but those are
Right.
completely different type of topic of
Right.
conversation.
Right.
Those were clearly not things trying to better my life, but asking somebody on a date, trying a new job,
Yeah.
running your own business, all those things. Those are the types of things that people over and over again in those later stage of life that are out of time now, that are looking at back and saying, what could I tell the next generation is don't be afraid to take more chances. And I know that's just one of the component. What are some of the other types of generational resistance that I know you're going to talk about in your book, but that we talk about
Yeah.
today?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think fatigue's another one, and because you think about it, I mean, we've talked about this before in the fact that all of us have a normal. We have a current way we go about making progress in our life, and your normal right now has led you to the place you are in your life. It's paid all your mortgage payments. It's bought any cars or clothes that you have. It's developed a level of relationships that you currently carry. It's your normal. It's your way you go about doing it. And the thing about the humans is we when we get into spending our energy in our normal, we're really good at it. We really become efficient at it, right? We're it doesn't cost us a lot of mental energy like the first time you learn to drive a car or the first time as a kid you learn to tie your shoes. So much mental energy because you didn't have the synaptic connections in your brain yet in order to do those things without really having to think about them. You have to consciously think. That's how synaptic connections form. And the more you do it, the stronger those connections get until eventually it just doesn't take you a lot of energy. So then you have this idea of new, and new is a different way of doing all the same stuff you're doing today, right? And and so new, it's tricky because it's never added to the bottom line. It's never paid your mortgage. It's never, created the level of relationship you had, and you're bad at it, or at least clunky at it. And because you don't have the synaptic connections to do it with minimal effort. And so to form those requires so much, it's a different kind of energy. And here's what I know to be true is that all of us are going to run out of time and energy before we run out of all the ideas and opportunities that we could go pursue. And you can spend your day completely dedicated to normal, the way you've always done it. And if you do that, you will be efficient. You will manage energy well. You can do a lot of it, but you and never do one thing new. Even if you want to do one thing new, like even if it's on your list, man, I'm going to do this. I'm going to implement. Let's say you read a book, Justin, or you go to a conference, or you listen to this podcast, and you're like, man, that's a great idea. And then oftentimes a year goes by, and somebody reminds you of that idea, and you're like, yeah, man, that is a good idea. I didn't do it, but man, that really would have been a good idea. It wasn't even that you were necessarily afraid to try it. It was more that you were too tired because you didn't organize your energy. And I think the energy model for this is really critical. So I want you to think about like a startup phase. And if you had a pie chart that represented where you were spending your energy, and I think a startup phase, particularly when I came into this business, it was like 75% new, 25% normal. And your progress is just slow. It just is because a bunch of new terminology you have to learn, a bunch of new systems and processes, a bunch of new synaptic connections that you're creating around this. And the more you do it, the more you work it, the more iterations you have with it. Because this isn't about time. You can have people spend a lot of time and don't grow very fast. And you have the opposite too. People that spend a shorter amount of time but grow faster because they do more iterations with it. They practice, iterate on it more. And that kind of pie chart of your energy moves to 50-50. And now you start to scale, right? You're better at it. It takes less new energy to do that thing. You're tweaking it and you're just creative on it. And then when you're really, really scaling, when that ladder's moving way up or that curve's moving way up, You're at like 25% normal, 25% new, 75% normal. And then it gets really tricky because you can continue like that. The problem is that last little bit, eventually running faster and working harder with you being mostly normal is not going to lead you to a big jump. In fact, it will lead you to plateau and maybe then even decline. Blockbuster Video was a great example of that, right? They were a great video store and they grew and grew and grew, but then they quit really normalizing new things to any scale. I mean, they were tweaking things. They were 25% new. We'll label the popcorn Blockbuster. You know, we'll do a new no late fees. Let's try that. You know, we'll do a new storefront look, new awning color. But they weren't really doing anything new. They were just tweaking normal with their new. Now, Netflix, they were new. I mean, they continue to be new. You look at Netflix; they've reinvented themselves from being distributing DVDs through the postal service to now they are a movie series creation house. Some of the best writers in the world are there, and they went from that startup that had like 141,000 subscribers, tried to get Blockbuster to buy them, to 10 years later when Blockbuster filed bankruptcy, being a $9 billion company, then today over a half a billion or like a $500 billion plus organization. And you know what? I don't know what they're going to do next, but if they keep their culture of normalizing new, because they go back, they don't just stay 75% normal, 25% new. They go back to 50-50. Say, let's blow some stuff up. Let's quit doing some things and let's try some new things. So, but the reason that happens is because they prioritize new. Because if fatigue, fatigue makes cowards of us all. Jimmy Johnson used to say that, the coach of the Dallas Cowboys, when they won the Super Bowl. And it does. You're tired and you're like, I just don't have any more energy. And you need your best energy for new. So Justin, as you and I go to like strategic coach and we think about where are we now? What is the next big 10x jump we want to take? Which if you're dreaming big, if you're like a 10x jump person, then I recommend you be that. A lot of your normal has to go away and you need new because the normal things are just not going to get you there. So many of the innovations we've come up with that we later have applied into our organization and made it a priority on the calendar that have become muscle memory to us were once so foreign, so hard. We don't know how we're going to do it. I don't know how it's going to work out. So love to hear your thoughts on that fatigue side.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's like an easy creep. I feel like fear and those things jump up in your face, and a lot of the other components that I think where resistance can come from, I think are much more obvious and or acute versus something that becomes chronic or develops behind the scenes, like
Yeah.
complacency. Um, that quote, "Comfort is the enemy of progress,"
Hmm.
as one that always resonates with me, and it's just so seemingly in how it comes in, not just to the day-to-day business. And honestly, the more successful you become, I think the easier it is for fatigue and those components to come in there, and still a lot of future opportunity and joy. And like the heritage components that we're talking about, we actually see people start moving away from things that are core and values and start operating from a different identity.
Yeah, I love that. It is so critical. Yes, fear is going to be there, and you again face it and rise, and then fatigue's going to be there, and that one's one where you just really you've got to prioritize your pursuit. You've got to say this is important. I need to manage my energy, and it can't always just be even when I feel like I'm in a groove that's 25% uh, new, 75% normal. That's eventually got to go back, and you need time frames. And so one of the time frames that we have is quarterly time frames where we get away, we recast vision. Where do we want to go? What's the big jump? Where are we starting from? What are we proud of? What's working well? And then what are we going to do to navigate between those 2 points? What new things that we think we need to learn, we need to explore, and we need to put on the calendar and take up space. And it honestly feels like you're cheating on the real work sometimes because it's like, well, I could just run my normal and instantly I could produce more. Because change is like remodeling a house while you're living in it. It's messy, it's inconvenient, it's better if you just left it alone temporarily. But long term, there's a cost not to change. And that is that you end up plateauing, not achieving what you're capable of. And so I think it's one of the critical pieces of resistance between the life you're living and the unlived life within you.
So On that note, again, these things that we're talking about are really values and become the central point. And you're talking about a family constitution. I guess really quick, one of the last questions I'd have would be for today's purpose. How are you focusing on helping families create that same kind of stance, values, and capture and create a mission that really serves others? Because
Yeah.
you have two sides of the business. For those of you who aren't aware, not only do we have the advisory side with client-facing components, but it's also advisors to advisors. So how are you helping create a mission that serves others while still building that generational wealth?
Yeah, so our kind of initial formula for that is to definitely start with a family constitution. And here's how you build it. You don't try and build this from scratch. I mean, some of you, if you're a writer and you like to write and think about these things, but either way, this will be real helpful in getting you to a place where you at least have an idea of what you what you want to do. And so I like this. We will give them three examples, and these are hypothetical examples. These are real families, but I've changed the names, and so I'll walk you through one example here, and we'll include these in the show notes for this for those of you who want it. So, like, here's a sample family constitution: the Johnson Family Constitution, faith, family, and financial stewardship. The preamble: we, the Johnson family, believe we are stewards of God's blessings, called to use our resources to serve others and honor Him. We commit to being beautiful savages, pursuing big ambitions that serve others, maintaining grateful hearts for our journey, and showing savage persistence in overcoming any challenges we face. Then our mission: to honor God through faithful stewardship, create opportunities for others to flourish, and raise generations who understand that wealth is a tool for service, not an end in itself. Then they have their three core values: big ambition or meaning. We pursue goals that serve God and others, not just ourselves. Every major family decision asks, how does this advance God's kingdom and help others flourish? Grateful condition, enjoyment. We celebrate God's blessings through family traditions, sharing adventures and grateful hearts. We remember our story and help others write better stories. Savage persistence, satisfaction. We face challenges with faith over fear, take systematic action when tired, and maintain humility when blessed with success. Then our family governance, which is just three simple points: quarterly family meetings using beautiful savage framework, annual because you say so discussions about God's direction for our family, decisions made through prayer, principle, and consensus. Our resource stewardship: first 10% to God through tithing, next 10% to our faith fund, opportunities to serve others. All major financial decisions filtered through our mission and values. Business ventures must be aligned with our calling to serve others. And coming down here to the last two components, our heritage practices: annual family recordings by parents and grandparents, greatest moment celebrations each quarter, scripture memory and prayer as family foundation, service projects that involve all generations. And then the last line on here is our commitment to growth. We normalize new approaches with preserving timeless values, while preserving timeless values. We encourage each generation to find their unique expression of our family mission while maintaining our core commitment to faithful stewardship. And this is one. We've got several others. Some people you might see, I'm not into, I'm not a God follower, and that's fine too. Still having this, you have mission, vision, values. You have things you believe that you would like. Hey, if I could reward my younger self with things I know now, here's what they'd be. That's what we're really talking about here. But these are templates. So we give them the template. They give them three templates, which we'll share with everybody. They kind of mess with them a little bit, make them their own. And then they send them to the family members that they want. And that's a starting point. It's a very, very simple starting point. Because with anything, you can get super like overwhelmed. Like in the book that I wrote, Family Savage Framework or Family Savage Heritage, you might read it and start going. In fact, we write about this in the book. Don't be overwhelmed. Just start somewhere. Because here's the deal, Justin. Everybody leaves a heritage. Now, some leave really good heritage, some not so good. And so what you want to do, I mean, like I feel like my parents left me a great heritage and still leaving me a great heritage. Never too late to leave a great heritage. And but they did it without like a structure. They did it. It was better caught than taught, if you will. Right. So I learned a lot. Sometimes I learned what not to do in areas that we had conversations. And then some things I'm like, man, I want to lean into that. And so, but having some intentionality, and then I'm going to tell you the recording side of this. If they just recorded themselves talking about that family constitution and maybe sharing some struggles and some stories with them at that time, can you imagine going back and being able to listen to a recording of your great grandfather
Hmm.
saying their family constitution and talking about it for a little bit? How empowering would that be?
Yeah, even still, I'm fortunate that one of my grandfathers is still surviving, even though he's almost 90 years old now. When he starts bringing up stories and new things that I never heard about and hearing about the struggles, two things happen. One, I just feel like a little kid again, right?
Yeah,
Listening to your grandpa tell these stories about a time that seems like it was from ancient past, even though it was less than 100 years ago, because it was so different. And then also the insight more into why he is the way he is and why that generation thinks the way they think. And some of those things are still relevant today that even now I'm like, why didn't we talk about this 20 years
yeah,
ago? Right? Like he's like, oh, you wouldn't have listened to me. I'm like, who knows? Like, but we could
yeah,
have this conversation, and it's just empowering and convicting to that point of what are those things that I need to be doing right now to capture that for my own kids and future generations. The
yeah,
hard lessons learned, and you may not have had parents or surviving grandparents. Even that in of itself, like talking about dealing with that and the struggles of having to learn through that, because your kids and future generations, they're going to grow up and they're going to run into stuff. You
absolutely.
overcome problems is a critical skill that you can help develop within them. So,
Love it.
well, hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll definitely have more discussions on this in the future. If you want to hear more and see some of the types of resources that we're developing, I highly encourage you to go over to the website, westyounglive.com. Until next time, you guys take care.